The beats are definitely reminiscent of hip-hop's best era.
Go subscribe, yeah, subscribe.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Brews and Reviews. It's knowledge, and today I'm reviewing Ghettosocks and DK, the producer. Listen to the masters. After going through so many hours and hours of analysis on Kendrick, I had to do pretty much the opposite of Kendrick, the world's biggest album. Had to go with something extremely underground. And after checking the track list on this with names like Skyzoo, Rome Streetz, CL Smoove, UFO Feeve, OC, just to name a few, I had to check this out. I hadn't heard of these guys before, but they got a dope track list put together. And maybe I should have checked for Ghettosocks at least. I did some research. He's been around since 2003, but like most Americans, I sleep on Canadian artists sometimes, though not all the time. I do check for MCs from other areas. Chaos, one of my favorite Canadian MCs of all time. And apparently Ghettosocks has a pretty good following in Canada. DK hasn't been around as long, dropping his first project in 2019. Nice double entendre with the title of this, Listen to the Masters, as in these guys are the masters, and the many guests that they include on here are also the masters, but also it's like listening to masters of the music or owning your masters, that kind of thing that MCs always talk about. And the title is even extended to some of the rappers that are sampled on the songs, cut up in scratches on this, who are undisputed masters in some of these voices that we hear on the project. So let's get into it. Reflections from the beginning with the off-key pianos, string synths, dusty vinyl hisses, and boom-bap drums. It's apparent this is going to be a throwback and homage to the beats and styles of the 90s. Ghettosocks says on the chorus, I fly, we fly, and they fly. I looked up and saw my reflection in the sky. So I was wondering, based on the backdrop that we're hearing here, if the reflections were referencing the styles of the past that he sees himself in that. So I think he could be saying here that he reflects those that are in the sky, dead, as in heaven, but also the great MCs that are elevated to a higher level. However, this could also just be his way of saying that he's already put in work, he's already paid his dues, and he's at that elite level, maybe on some braggadocious stuff, comparing himself to those former legends. On the note of putting in time, a pilot has to log flight hours to get a license, so he compares that on the refrain to the time that he's put in perfecting his art. One thing that's missing from this track in particular, if it's a throwback album, is a third verse. However, we do hear third verses on every other track, but that's because we got a lot of guest MCs on this and they got to fit them all in. What it seems, so definitely a pattern is forming now with 90s inspired beats. They include scratches on this, sampled rap vocals on the chorus, the style made famous by Primo, DJ Premier, but done by so many of the great producers in the 90s. And these are very recognizable voices that we're hearing on this chorus. We got Havoc and, of course, Biggie Smalls from Warning. Any hip-hop fan should recognize that right off the bat. Ghettosocks gives some very general criticisms of governments and classism in his verse. Then Skyzoo comes through, probably the verse I was most looking forward to in seeing the track list, and he weaves metaphors of sleep and dreams throughout his verse, such as the dream of twin mattresses turning to a California king. Rome Streetz rounds it out with his smooth flow. The cadence of Sky and Rome go really good together, and I'd really like to hear these two collab more. Rome talks about how he's been executing to make his dreams come to fruition. A nice chess metaphor too. He says, fuck the world like it's a tradition. I rap like fresh at the chess table with the clock ticking. Nice enough to checkmate your king with a pawn. I pee on the shit you peons be on. Definitely one of the highlights of the album with some of the best MCs in the game right now. The Masters, this one features CL Smoove and L the Sensei. Haven't heard from CL in a while, but he could definitely be qualified as a master. The scratches and samples on the chorus continue, and you can't go wrong with a KRS-One sample either. There's a very smooth beat. CL sounds good too, really probably the best verse on this track, and he sounds natural on it because DK's beat fits that Pete Rock style. Be a Mango, dope bass line, and probably the best concept of the album. This questions gender stereotypes with 2 female MC guest stars, and first up is Phoenix Pagliacci. Pagliacci? I'm probably saying that wrong, but her lyrics are on point, questioning a misogynistic society that tries to dictate how women should be treated and how they should act. She says, "Can I be on your top 5 instead of my own? Can we talk about sex or y'all still ain't grown? Misogyny is your prodigy, your privilege showing. How you gonna be the alpha dog with your head in a cone? Tunnel vision." Socks comes through with some of his best lyrics on the project. He says, "I never saw my father shed a tear. Maybe that's why when I'm upset, I get a beer." I can relate. He goes on to connect the ways of the past with bias and compares old-fashioned to old fascists. Then we get another female MC that I'm probably mispronouncing, Lxvndr, I think, closes it out talking about how we're moving in the right direction on acceptance, saying, "Do as thou wilt." We're like flowers pushing through broken, dusty trails. In other words, the new, beautiful ideas popping up from the ugliness of beliefs of the past. And I'm going to drink to this track. I am sipping on an Anchor Liberty Ale from San Francisco, a 5.9%. Very straightforward ale. And I probably should have got a Canadian beer for this. I've had some good craft brews up in Toronto. I'll get one of those on the next Ghettosocks project. Right now, I'm sipping on this and listening to the Masters. All in, another smooth track, reminds me of some old boot camp stuff. There's a whole vibe here with a song chorus, and the guest, OC, explains the title, All In, being all in on the flow, from his mouth to God's ears. Moka Only is also featured with a good verse on here, but the one thing that I'm realizing at this point is we got a lot of features. Actually, every track has 2 features except for the first song and the last song. Granted, that is why I checked for the project, but it would have been cool to hear what Ghettosocks has to offer more for Dolo and really see what he's all about. Chicken Chop. After a brief skit that definitely fits the 90s theme of superfluous skits about shady record execs at that, we get another recognizable sample from the track that put Busta Rhymes on the map, Scenario. Tachichi is featured here and seems to be a frequent collaborator with Ghettosocks, comparing their chemistry to Penn and Teller. Socks comes through also with one of his best flows using alliteration in his verse. He says, "As soon as the beat drop, you know that it's on, damn it. Cool, calm commander commandeering the whole planet." And then UFO Feeve, one of the most underrated underground rappers, comes through with some braggadocious rhymes to round it out. Then we get into Smoove Regardless, Slick Rick sample from his most famous track, Children's Story, and I love the vocal samples on this. They're definitely playing into the nostalgic concept, and they're definitely not done enough in hip-hop these days, but I do wish that all of them weren't so recognizable and that they would have dug a little bit more to just add a little mystery to the project. Of course, to modern ears, maybe Slick Rick and KRS-One and that old Busta Rhymes track aren't as recognizable, but I definitely picked them out easily. This track is named very well because we got a laid-back, jazzy beat, and Ambition and Justo have smooth voices as well. John McEnroe, I'd say this is another highlight. Lyrically, we do get a Ghostface sample, another recognizable one from his most popular album. But Ghettosocks talks about police violence and murder with a nice metaphor. He says, It's so true, the world's a hospital, code blue. When they say don't move, y'all say don't shoot. Code blue is a hospital code for when somebody's in critical condition, such as when they're having a heart attack, and they got to yell code blue and everybody go and save them. But blue, of course, is also the color that's associated with cops. So he's basically saying while they're here, it's a critical condition and they have the potential to put people very close to death. And it gets deeper as he talks about them murdering indigenous women, and he questions, saying, it's astonishing what God do. They represent the law, but ain't never been to law school. That is quite a conundrum if you think about it. Like, why are they representing the law and not having any kind of understanding to really understand it and respect it correctly? There's great throwback vibes on this album. The beats are definitely reminiscent of hip-hop's best era, the 90s. However, some of the song concepts and scratches remind me of the early 2000s more, and the underground movement that we saw there directly from MCs and artists that were inspired and grew up in the 90s. I kind of compare some of this to what Kxng Linguists was doing with their first two albums. And maybe it makes sense since I saw that Ghettosocks started in 2003. He came out around that same time. And during that time, my favorite artist that I already mentioned from Canada, Chaos, was dropping, and on some other shit. But this is very much like those underground early 2000s vibes when they were already replicating what they heard growing up on in the 90s. Ultimately, if you like throwback, boom-bap beats and record scratches as a fundamental element of hip-hop as it should be, then I recommend this album. They do those things very well. The guest list they threw together is also very admirable also, and I can't say any verse on this from any of the guest stars or Ghettosocks himself misses at all. However, Ghettosocks with this extended guest list does have trouble standing out from the crowd sometimes. Still, this is a solid listen through and through, and I'm going to give this a 7 out of a 12-pack. Thank you for watching my review of Ghettosocks and DK's Listen to the Masters. If you like this, go ahead and hit like now and hit me up in the comments. If you didn't like it, also let me know why in the comments. I drop hip-hop and hops related content consistently, so subscribe to my channel now. And until I see you next time, keep buzzing.
Fucking man says subscribe.
But if he's on his channel saying that somebody's album is better than mine, unsubscribe to that motherfucker.
No, your album's the best, man.
There you go. Subscribe.
Yeah.
Subscribe.